Hi,
Hi, Patti.
everybody. How you doing, Angela?
I'm good. I'm good.
How's the weather in Australia?
It's actually raining incessantly, come a few floods, some extra swimming pools. How about you in Arizona?
Actually, today it's been raining, so that's kind of unusual for us, but it's been raining all day in my part of the
Yeah,
world.
that's very unusual. And the UK's been raining as well.
Well, we're building better relationships with at home and at work with Angela and Patti. It's a podcast. If you're watching us on our BBR Facebook page, you would know that. But anybody else that's watching us, I'm Patti,
And I'm Angela.
and we talk about all things regarding relationships. Sometimes it's woo, sometimes it's not.
Yeah, so when we say woo, it could be things to do with healing. And when it's not woo, we look at things such as communication in the workplace or communication skills in relationships. And we wanted to talk about why we do the podcast and a little bit about us so you can find out more about us and why we do the podcast. It's our little obsession.
So, right now, I am drinking wellness tea because it's in the afternoon in Arizona. Angela, what are you drinking and what time is it where you're at?
I'm having some coffee, probably too much, and I'm in Australia, in Sydney, and it's morning time, about 11 says in Australia.
When I drink coffee, I have to have flavored creamer. I love my coffee with creamer. I can't drink it without it. What about you?
You don't want to know what I do. People, when they find out what I do, it's like, really? Because I do stevia, which a lot of people hate,
Oh,
and
okay.
almond milk.
Oh, almond milk. Yeah, yeah.
Like I have a long black with a little bit of almond milk, so people just taste my coffee and go, "No, what are you doing?" And I'm like, "That's so I am the only one that can drink my coffee."
Well, mine looks like tea instead of coffee with cream in it. You know how the
Ah,
English tea and you put your cream in it? That's what my
ah,
coffee looks like, but it's coffee. But I love tea too, so a little bit of both. The tea that I'm drinking right now, I don't have any cream in it, and I'm just drinking it straight, but
drinking
it's
it
good.
straight.
Hmm.
So, Patty, can you explain? Like we've mentioned that you're in Arizona. Where are you from and what you do?
Well, I live in Arizona, in Mesa, Arizona, which is outside of Phoenix, but I grew up in Tucson, Arizona. I've been living here now for 30 years in Mesa, and I'm a work life balance and leadership coach, and I'm also a Reiki master. And Reiki is energy healing. In my previous life, I worked in government.
And you also worked in a managerial role as well, didn't you? So you were like
Yes.
we call it the meat and the sandwich. You're kind of positioned between the people upstairs, making you do stuff to the people downstairs.
Yes.
And
Yeah. So the people that I help with coaching and with Reiki and work life balance, uh, I gear towards managers and supervisors to help them with their daily issues and their work lives because they work 24/7 and they need more balance in their life. A lot of times they put their careers before their personal life. Some of them don't even have a personal life because work has been everything to them. So I work on helping them with challenges in their work life as well as challenges with work life balance to help them have a life outside of work.
right. And also a lot of our podcast topics touch on how to manage difficult personalities at work, because you've had so many experiences
Yes.
trying to make the people upstairs happy and
And
people
the
downstairs.
people under you, yes,
Yeah.
or your coworkers that are equal to you, and everybody trying to claw their way up the ladder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I'm in Australia. I'll talk a little bit about my background. I've got a colourful background. I actually was a dance performer in my 20s and 30s, and I was born in Sydney, Australia. And in my 30s, I moved to the US, Florida, and then I lived in New York. So I've had a lot of travel around the US as well, and I did real estate investing, and I was also learning about online entrepreneurship. And I was using my dance performance background and my dance healing background to work with people and get them to listen to their bodies and build a deeper connection to themselves. So I also use that in all of my business and entrepreneur work as well. And eventually I got certified as a relationship coach and a spiritual coach. And I'm also a healer that works with the body through movement and meditation. So I have quite a palette of skills that I draw on. And right now I'm working more with younger people and children to really start listening to themselves, especially because all of my work as a movement person, a dancer, and as a healer was about connecting to the body. And younger people these days, and adults, are losing that connection to their body, and also are getting a lot of overwhelm with their feelings. So my passion in working with relationships and the self is to help people be accepting and start to build a better relationship with themselves. So we wanted to share in the video about why we do this podcast. We're quite two different coaches, two different parts of the planet, and we met through our coaching school when we started our master coach certification with,
Mhm.
yeah, we met over the internet. We've never met in person. So Patti, can you share about how we stumbled into the podcast and why we keep doing it and we're obsessed with doing it?
Right. So when Angela and I were in master coaching school, we became accountability partners,
Oh, yes.
and we got to know each other very well, coaching each other and also keeping us accountable for the different things that we were learning as master coaches. And after we graduated, we still were accountability partners to each other, and we started talking about life and what we do and the people that we work with and the people that we help, and all the challenges at the time. Angela, I think you were living in Australia at that time.
Yeah.
And of course I was living here in Arizona. And we talked about all of our different challenges that we have in relationships, and thought so many people out there want help, and they want to change their relationships with others, and they want to make that change within themselves so that they have better relationships. So that's how we started talking about it, and we started pondering about, let's do a podcast. So back in 2018 is when
Oh,
we
okay.
started our podcast. And we didn't really know what we were doing, but we just did it. And we've learned along the way, and it's been fun. And we did have a hiatus for a little while Angela was dealing with her illness and recovering from it. And we knew that we still wanted to do the podcast after Angela healed, and we knew that it was important. We both had a strong feeling that this is what we're meant to do. We're
Yeah.
meant to help people, and we want to help people with their challenges. And we're not saying that we're perfect in relationships. we have our own struggles, but that's why we love what we do, is because we've been there and done some of these things, and we understand what it's like to have those struggles with others.
And one of the things that was fascinating to me, because we haven't met physically, I was in Australia, Patti was in US, and at some times when we were doing the podcast, I was in France as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes I was, no, I was always in France or Australia when we were doing the podcast. And I started to discover things through Patti about lifestyle in America and the managerial roles and the struggles of relationships. And I was able to compare what it was like for me. I'm not in the corporate world. I'm in the online world with entrepreneurs. I'm in just the social space and with a lot of family relationships and love relationships. And I was seeing how some of the struggles are the
Mm-hmm.
same.
Yes.
So you can be in the workplace having a relationship problem, and it's exactly the same as a personal relationship problem. However, in the workplace, there's different expectations about how it's supposed to be managed. And I thought it was a amazing way also to compare some of my Australian experiences as an Australian. I live in a few countries, or I live in Australia now, but it was really important for me to see how Australian culture and USA culture, and in particular Arizona culture as well, from Patti's life and work experience, how that was interesting to see how the two different countries relate to different relationships in the workplace and at
Mm-hmm.
home, because there are a lot of similarities because they're both Western countries, and also because of the internet. Patti and I, a lot of our podcasts are looking at how the internet and social media has changed the dynamic of relationships. And our focus started to become about how this collective experience now in the social media affects every country and every human being. And also, what we were doing, ironically, before the pandemic, was we were tapping into this shift where home and work were starting to become the same
One.
thing.
Yeah. And definitely bringing chaos to your boundaries between work and home.
Yeah.
With the pandemic and everything, people were working and still are working from home and not having boundaries of when to cut off work.
And with regards to work-life balance, even myself, I work in the gig economy now. So I've got a gig here, a gig there. I've got so much chaos in how I
Yeah.
do little parts of work here for different organizations. And to do balance in that context is really difficult. And that seems to be where the future of work is going, because people are not wanting the 5-day work week or the 4-day work week. They actually want something more like, I call it the Uber effect. You just sort of set your hours and then you're on, and then you change depending on the nature of your life and your circumstances. And I,
And a lot of people that have, I'm sorry, Angela, to interrupt you, but a lot of people that have children, they're
yes,
trying to work around, nap time when they go to bed. So they have different hours, but they're still working the same amount of hours or more, but they're just working at different times that are best fit for their family unit.
yeah. So that change in the way we deal with our work and the way we bring work home, for me, is very much about, one reason why we do this podcast is to give people the skills of intuition on how to deal with these changes instead of just going into panic and chaos, which is Patti's other chaos related podcast. But we're really looking at how to give emotional management skills, how to listen to yourself in amongst the change, which is just going to keep on happening, as we start to get more and more technology as part of our lives. And the plain truth is that the technology is not helping people with relationships. And our podcast is about dealing with those struggles and how to look at the struggle from a different perspective. We do bring a lot of woo-woo in there because I'm a healer and Patti is a Reiki practitioner. And because we have had such transformation from the healing work, and coaching also is a part of that transformation. And maybe we can explain a little bit, Patti, as well about we talked about why we did the podcast, but what is our vision for the future of relationships? We've talked about how like people are dealing with this chaos and change, but one of the goals of our podcast is to help people have better relationships as they're dealing with change. So how would you describe our vision for better relationships or building better relationships?
Angela and I, every year before the year, we plan out different topics that we're going to do. And last year we brought in some people that we interviewed to get different views and different topics. And the topics that we talk about are topics that we think you are interested in and the challenges in life. We also talked about this year of having a journal and a meditation for our listeners to help them throughout the year or their life. With the journal, we took our 15 podcast episodes, the first 15, as the beginning to talk about the different topics that we talked about in our first 15 episodes. And Angela made a meditation to help go with it, a daily meditation that you can do every day to help you with your relationships. We felt like people need more than just the podcast to help build their relationships. And we talk about subjects that sometimes are difficult to talk about. They even trigger Angela and I. There's been a couple times where we've been triggered by these topics. And some of them were listener topics that listeners had asked for, which makes the podcast great because we need to talk about these things. We talk about the difficult things that a lot of people don't talk about. And that's why the relationships are suffering, because they're not communicating. What else, Angela?
And
did I miss something?
no, I was going to just say about what you shared about we saw that we needed more than the podcast episodes themselves.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of our podcasts share actual questions to explore yourself. And because there's so much change and overwhelm for people with all this change right now, and a lot of negative feedback and communication in the world through social media, but also in terms of relationships, people are so unhopeful in general.
Yeah.
Patti and I created the journal from our first 15 episodes, journal questions. These are like the gold of the journal questions. There's actually more within the podcast episodes themselves. We wanted to create something simple because people, when they get overwhelmed with change, they go into panic. And one of the things we have for our vision of the future of better relationships is that people can not just survive through panic, but they can start to feel this sense of self-empowerment and be able to make change in the way they relate to themselves or to their current situation of chaos, crisis, or basically overwhelm of the change itself. So the journal took out those really simple questions to help focus.
Yes. And we've been in our own overwhelm experiences throughout our lives. So we understand, and going back and looking at some of the things that we transpired in our lives, we wish we had something like this for us that we didn't have.
Yeah. And so our podcasts do a lot about talking about things that people don't talk about. That's the first step. The journal questions actually give you something very focused to start looking at yourself. And then the meditation for me, because of my dance and movement background and self-reflection through feeling my body, the meditation is to really connect to your heart and your feelings, and to feel what it's like to send out positive energy into the world. A lot of our podcasts have some strategies around how to send out positive energy in a really negative work environment, or if you're really negative in your home space, especially in lockdown or in isolation. And the meditation is a practice exercise to start practicing that on a daily basis. Everything I've learned through coaching, through movement, and changing your behavior and working with people in trauma is repetition. I used to refer to the book The Brain That Changes Itself by Dr. Norman Doidge. And he says with patients with brain trauma, the most simplest and effective strategy was repetition. So they teach people to repeat the same exercise so it actually starts to change the brain and reprogram the brain. I actually had a direct experience of that when I had cancer in 2019. I survived the cancer, which looked like it was supposed to kill me, but it wasn't my time. And then I had brain trauma and body trauma. And I started with my movement practice and meditation practice to start to gently, slowly start to feel myself grounded and centered again. And the biggest thing with the meditation is if we don't, as a collective humanity, start sending out positive energy, we're never going to change the future of our relationships. And we're never going to survive these changes as a species. So, Patti, I actually feel the vision for BBR, our BBR is building better relationships. That's our shorthand way to talk about our podcast, is really about being a voice for people who feel isolated, overwhelmed, to feel powerful about how you can start to make slow, steady, gentle, and real change. It's not going to happen overnight, but by consistent effort and by starting to look at yourself and those areas that may feel uncomfortable in a gentle way, a safe way, and a proactive way, you can start to find real change in your life. And in the title of this video, I've said why building better relationships is our future. So I thought we could just finish with an exploration around that. If our species, our human species, doesn't have better relationships, what do you think is our future, Patti? I'll just throw that out there. It's a
Chaos.
hypothetical. We're already
Yeah.
experiencing it.
Yes.
We're already experiencing it.
If we don't have empathy, compassion for one another, what will we have? It doesn't look like a good future. We have to learn to put ourselves in other people's shoes and be kind and considerate and listen to one another and not just, oh, whatever. No, it's not whatever. We need to really talk to each other and spend time with each other. That's how we change the world. It's when we ignore each other and don't like each other and bicker and complain. Constant complaining puts you in a mindset that's not good. and you're not kind to others when you're constantly complaining and judging others. So we want you to go from chaos to calm.
Yeah. And feel powerful in the way you can make positive change in your relationships. That's why we always knew from the beginning, 2018, it's building better relationships. It's not an overnight thing. When you build a house, you need a foundation. And our podcast, we're offering you a foundation to start exploring yourself and starting to build, and how you can build your own techniques. We share a lot of our life experiences and our strategies and our techniques. And those questions that we have in the podcasts are a guideline on how to build a deeper understanding of yourself.
Yes. And sometimes answering those questions is uncomfortable. But that's why it helps you reflect on your inside and what you have in your heart at the moment.
And I pretty much laugh at myself anyway. I've been so awkward most of my life, so I'm used to being uncomfortable. That's probably one of my gifts. So in the podcast, I share a lot of stories about how I did things poorly or how I spoke to people in my relationships like a jackass. And can I say that? I don't know. And
Haven't we all been that way? And sometimes still is.
Yeah. And I guess one of my goals from the podcast is also to help people see, just don't take yourself so seriously or make relationships a problem to be solved. They're actually, when you build better relationships, they're creative. And a lot of our podcasts are about creative. Patti and I are very creative. And there's a lot of fun. And people have kind of lost touch with that aspect. And we're bringing that back through the podcast.
Yeah, we have to take time to have fun and to play and get away from work. Because if you don't, you get burned out and overwhelm sets in and burnout.
Yeah.
And then you're no good to yourself or to others.
And one of my favorite TV series or Netflix series is The Office, the American one. The British one I like too, but the American one, I'm in love with Steve Carell. So I didn't understand Patti's universe. And so I started watching The Office, and then I went, I think I'm starting to understand. So is there anything else, Patti, that you wanted to share about us and why we're obsessed with building better relationships?
We want to help you with your relationships, and we would love to hear your topics that you would like us to talk about, or anything that we've done in past podcast episodes. We would love to hear what you've experienced and how you conquered building better relationships.
And so we have our Facebook group, which you can ask to join that group and share your thoughts there. And we've also got our Anchor podcast is on Anchor. It's also on Spotify.
And we have questions and polls on Spotify.
Oh, great.
Please go to Spotify if you have Spotify and take the polls and also answer the questions.
So I think that's everything I'd like to share today. And if anyone would like to reach out to us, you can find us through Building Better Relationships at Home Work on Facebook and on Anchor. With the whole title is Building Better Relationships at Home and Work with Angela and Patti. So you can find us specifically.
And you'll see the little heart that we have that says Building Better Relationships. It's red, purple, and pink. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments, and we'll be happy to answer anything. And we look forward to having another podcast here soon. Bye.
Bye.